Hello, I'm Stella Farrington. I'm Head of Content for Energy Risk, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Paul Cusenza, who's the Chief Executive of Nodal Exchange. Hi, Paul.
Stella, wonderful to be with you today, as always.
Thank you. And Nodal Exchange is the 2025 winner of Energy Risk's Exchange of the Year award. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. We very much appreciate the honor, and it's an award that really is shared with all of our constituents, right? Which is not just employees of Nodal, but it's also our trading entities, our clearing members, our settlement banks, our brokers, our systems vendors, and everybody. Because an exchange really doesn't operate without the entire community, and so on behalf of my entire community at Nodal Exchange, we thank you.
Great. So one of the things that impressed the judges the most about Nodal's performance last year was that despite some very extreme volatility in the electricity world, you managed to grow the business, you hit new record volumes, and Nodal now registers 57% of open interest of all US power futures contracts. So I wanted to ask, did you deliberately set out to sort of catch that, I guess, critical mass of over 50%? And what is it that you're doing to attract this growth?
Well, thank you. And it is, marvelous to reach that open interest goal of over 50%, so more than half of the market. And yeah, that was, our original goal when we launched. I mean, we were a brash young startup, whatever, and thought that, we were doing something different, which was serving the more granular power contracts of the market. But we always focused on trying to serve the needs of those who need to hedge in the market. I mean, the reason why exchanges exist is for price risk management, credit risk management, and liquidity risk management. The price risk management, because exposing the power markets as a utility, et cetera, you have this issue of, say, exposed to the price in 2026 or 2027. And so in order to build plans to be able to build generation and fund it, or alternatively, if you're serving like the retail market, to give them a set price that they can count on, price hedging is really important. But when you price hedge, let's say for 2026, one of the dilemmas is that then you also get a credit risk where if it's for like 2028 or whatever, you don't know if your counterparty, if you did a bilateral trade, will be there. So we have a clearinghouse, which then becomes the buyer to every seller, the seller to every buyer. With that credit protection dimension, then you can trade with anybody anonymously. You don't need to worry about the clearing risk. In fact, that was the solution to the financial crisis back in 06, 07 time period. And so it's good to have that. And then the liquidity risk, you have a place where you can trade. And so the liquidity grows, of course, when we can grow and be the majority of the market. So we are like over 95% of the business in the of the traded volume in the more granular contracts. But then even in the overall market, the entire market, we reached this milestone of 57% of the total open interest. So we're very proud of that, and we're proud of our ability to grow. And again, as I said, we started as a small startup exchange, competing with very large multi-billion-dollar competitors. There's one competitor left in the market that we're still competing with, and we hope to continue to grow, both to see growth not only in market share but also in the total growth of the market, because there is also total market growth too that we think we can be part of in the years to come.
Okay, thank you. So, Paul, the last time you and I met was not that very long ago in Houston, last month at Energy Risk USA, and you gave a very interesting talk there in which you used some Nodal Exchange data to illustrate some interesting themes around renewables and weather, and also just to show the sheer volatility that there's been in the market recently. So I wonder if we could dive a bit deeper into some of that. And could we start with the Texas region and all the volatility that's been there? And could you sort of give us some numbers on that, maybe sort of show us a range so people can understand, the real volatility, the range that people have to deal with in these markets, and talk about how people were able to cope with such extremes? Because even for electricity prices, some of these moves were extreme, weren't they?
Very much so. And so the risk management dimension is what we believe is our strength. That plays a role in how much margin we hold, that credit risk protection dimension. And we believe we're very capital efficient, but also risk protective. Our model works extremely well. That differentiates us. We use an expected shortfall variation at risk based model. But anyway, to make this more clear to most people who aren't deep into the analytics of it all, the power markets are probably the most volatile markets out there for commodities. And an illustration in Texas would be, let's go to Houston and let's go back to 2021 in Storm Uri, which hit. And that was an extreme condition where temperatures got 10 degrees and across much Texas, and froze up a lot of the windmills and the gas pipelines, et cetera, and created a supply crunch, which then meant, because there's still demand to get the heating, because it's also very cold, higher demand, it created a price push. So, and to illustrate the extent of that, if I look at Houston, I look at, say, the month of February, the whole month, the average price of power during the peak hours, it was typically 24 hours, let's say, in 2020, just the year before, just $24 was the price of power. Reasonable price, right? You might expect that. Well, it turned out that then in 2021, and again, because of this storm hitting, the price went to $1,808 for the month. That's a 75 times increase. And for those people who didn't price hedge, which is what futures contracts provide, and were exposed to the retail price. In fact, there were some marketers that had gone to retail customers and said, hey, get the wholesale price. It's cheaper than a retail price, which is more averaged. Well, they were then shocked and surprised to find that they got a bill that was 75 times the prior one. It's like getting a bill for 6.3 years in 1 month. That's an extreme degree of volatility. That is a measure of what can happen in these markets. And that's why it's important to hedge and be hedge protected, so that someone else can accept that price risk on your behalf, and you can have a fixed price, which may be higher in some years and lower than others, but it's something you can plan on then when it's hedged. And then our risk models worked fine. Our markets moved smoothly through that whole situation. But let me give you an idea of what's happened then more recently. So if I looked at the years following 2021 and 22, it was $70, still very high, triple what it may normally be. But then it dropped to $22, then $18 in 2024, and then in 2025 it went up to $35. So it's still sitting at that lower range. Well, right now, if you wanted to hedge the price for February of 2026, you can do that at Nodal Exchange, and the price is about $65. Well, $65 would be, over the last maybe 8 or 9 years, it's the second highest, or that would be the third highest price. So it's much higher than the 35, whatever. But better to get the 65 than to be exposed to the $1,800 or something like that. So that's the point of that. But it's not just winter. So let's go again back to Houston and Texas. Let's talk about summer now, right? And there was a summer of 2023 was particularly hot. There was 100 days, I think, in Austin straight where it was over 90 degrees or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy hot weather. And so Texas prices, which are also not often that high, they went to $324 in the summer of 2023, but dropped to $50 in the summer of 2024. Well, that's a 6x difference, right? Again, if I wanted to hedge this right now for summer coming up, and it's just a couple months away now, but August of 2026, you can trade that price, or August of 2025, you can trade that $167. 167 may seem like a lot. It's more than the $50 last year, but it's also less than the 324. The whole point is it allows with futures for you to be able to measure it. And I'll give one last maybe example here of the power prices. I'm going to go out west to Los Angeles, to California. And let me just say that in Los Angeles, so there in the spring and the fall, it can be kind of moderate temperatures. So sometimes you don't necessarily have to use as much heating and cooling. So demand can be a bit lower. You couple that with all of the solar rooftop development in LA, and this gives an example of what renewable power can do. And you look at then the peak prices in California, and you look at, say, the price in 2024 in April, it actually went -8 cents. it was -8 cents for the power. And that's because, there's still renewable credits and other things, but there's so much power available that, in fact, the average price for the month of April was -8 cents. This past April, just a couple months ago, it was $10, and you can hedge it now for 2026 at $18. But the point is that there's just a lot of volatility in the market. We use risk models to address that. I love that your organization is Energy Risk, because we are all about risk, and it allows people to manage that price risk that exists by being able to trade futures, but we manage it effectively with the credit risk being both capital efficient and risk protective, so that we're holding the right funds. Our models work very well. That's our strength of Nodal. And then the liquidity risk is, hey, we're 57% of the open interest now across the United States and growing.
And really interesting there, because those two examples show, the first one, Storm Uri. I mean, you would expect extreme weather, extreme prices, but interesting that you're getting tricky prices, negative prices in areas where it's really moderate. Nothing much is going on in terms of weather or demand changes. So, yeah, interesting. So there's obviously lots of talk at the moment about increased demand on electricity from data centers due to AI. I wondered what you see there, and whether you think people are right to have concerns over whether supply can actually meet demand, especially green supply.
Yeah, so I think that it's a real issue. I mean, AI and data centers are going to use a lot more electricity. I understand that a Google search, it can be 10 times as much, for example. So we're just in the early stages of really applying AI more broadly, and it's just expanding rapidly. So yes, it's going to take more electricity usage that will increase demand, in which case we need more supply. We certainly are continuing to hopefully build more renewable power, but that may mean also more natural gas power, which can also come on as needed to sort of meet demand and supply differences as whenever, because natural gas just comes on immediately, which is great, whereas you have to have the sun or the wind going for some of the renewable energy sources. So until we get batteries, which can really help with that. So yes, I do see that as an issue with AI. Certainly electric vehicles will also play a role there as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So you talked about some of the things that differentiate Nodal, and one of the other things is the number of contracts that you have there. So I believe it's almost 1,700 power contracts and over 800 environmental contracts. So obviously this, I guess one of the reasoning for it is it allows users to avoid as much basis risk as possible. But how do you get the critical mass in those contracts? How do you avoid, I guess, the danger of splitting liquidity?
Yeah, so that goes back to our roots initially, and we started up back in and launched in 2009 to really be able to handle these granular contracts, because the issue is that power is priced locally. It's not like gas or oil, which can be stored. You need to get the local price of power because it's impacted by transmission line constraints, it's impacted by local weather, et cetera. So all those things mean that the locational dimension is important, and that's how people needed us to launch. And so we do the granular. We also have the granular and the environmental, because a lot of the programs in the United States in the environmental arena are state-driven. So you need some very much state-driven contracts to meet those needs in those compliance as well as non-compliance markets. So again, that's why we've done that, and that's been a strength of us. We believe we've built the right risk models to manage the risk. We do price mark these contracts twice a day, and one of our strengths is our ability to do that using a variety of information sources, so that we can mark the prices that the market is seeing, not forecasting what we think the price is, but marking it based on the markets. But yes, the liquidity is not the liquidity in the sense of it doesn't trade necessarily every day, some of these contracts, like a location where there's, say, a nuclear plant, but there is liquidity on demand, and that's because there's also the very robust financial transmission right markets, which are run by the local and regional ISOs and RTOs, but basically they run the electric grids and systems in various regions across the country in the United States. And that market, which is a separate one run by the ISOs and RTOs, helps also with the price informing, which helps then with this dimension that liquidity may not happen every day in the futures market for a contract. But as you noted earlier, we talked about like with demand increasing with AI and other dimensions. The only way to really manage that is the unknown price, is to hedge with a price hedge, right? And through a futures contract. But you need to do it at the location that's relevant, because without that, then you have a very dirty hedge, if you will. So we meet that for the market. We're over 95% of the granular power market in the United States, and we're proud to be able to serve that. And we're able to do that because of the strengths of our risk model and our ability to do accurate price marking of these granular locations, even in conditions of less liquidity. But when you want to get in and out of it, people can trade. I'll also lastly say that we keep margin based on the price risk volatility, but we also hold additional margin based on liquidity risk. So a contract that's traded less, we will hold more margin because you may have to break through the market price to get the trade done. It's a small amount, but it is kept there. And liquidity risk is another important mention of doing proper risk management, which we like to believe we do.
Okay, thank you. So talking about your environmental market contracts, could you talk to us a bit about where you see that market going, perhaps over the next 2 to 3 years, especially given the backdrop of some changes in environmental policy from the US administration?
Yeah, I see the markets to keep continuing to grow very rapidly because that is the direction we're going. And there's very much state-driven programs. One of the things that's maybe different about Europe and some other places around the world is that while we've never really had federally driven environmental programs, there are some like RINs, but most of them are like renewable energy credits, which are state-driven programs. Renewable energy credit is where you say that when 1 megawatt hour is created of power, that it's in fact created cleanly, and then you get a credit for that. And so different states may have a requirement to meet so many of these, and it can be even solar RECs, or it can just be environmental RECs, and sometimes we tri-state RECs that can meet these compliance requirements. Anyway, they're state-driven programs. So there was, like, for example, an order in April given by the current administration in the United States, the presidential administration, and basically saying, hey, we want to ensure that energy is properly being reinforced, and if state programs are getting in the way of, for example, gas and oil or whatever, we need to address that. When that happened in April, I should note that the prices of, for example, the Regional Green Gas Initiative contracts, which are sort of in the Northeast, carbon credits, basically multiple states grouping together, not a federal program, but multiple states, but they're often called RGGI contracts, RGGI. They dropped from $24 to $17, the day of that sort of announcement. They've since climbed back up to over $22 as people realize that the federal government really doesn't have control over what the states do. The states responded that they're going to continue to manage these programs. So I believe that that's still a robust and growing market, and another market where with these compliance credits, it's important to be able to hedge. And it is interesting. I'll make one quick remark. In the Northeast, the prices are very expensive for some of these. They can be $30, $40 for a REC, for example, whereas for given states, but like in Texas, there used to be a requirement. It's now not required, but they still properly registered these RECs in Texas. And so they trade like for $2 or $3. And that is, to me, the largest voluntary carbon or a voluntary environmental market in the world, potentially, because Texas RECs trade very significantly. And Nodal is 99% of that market. We're very proud to serve the Texas REC market.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Nodal now quite recently has started listing natural gas contracts. Could you talk about how would firms gain from trading natural gas on Nodal, and what's your ambitions for that part of the market?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, I certainly want to continue to grow and view us that we will continue to grow in power markets and in the environmental markets as well. We will be a dominant player in gas. I want to be a player. There's already 2 other exchanges offering something there, but I want to be a significant player, and I think that we can do that over time. A third of power, roughly a little more than that, is generated with natural gas, and about a third of natural gas is used to generate power. So these markets are interlinked. And what's important about that is that they also, because they're interlinked, there's cross-margining benefits. And yet, as I said earlier, we're 57% of the power market. If you then also add your gas positions with your power positions, you can get credit. If I'm long power, short gas, for example, that can help me from a margin requirement perspective, whatever my trading portfolio is. So for those customers, we want to be able to serve them. And so I believe in time, we should get a significant part of the market. But, I'm not expecting us to be more than half the market. We have two big competitors there, but we should get a reasonable share of it because of the cross-margining benefits in natural gas. One of the things we're doing is we're focusing more on electronic trading and screen trading. We're providing market makers. We're introducing Nodal Access, which is our front end to basically help people electronic trade on our markets. It's very important in the gas markets and becoming more important in the power markets, environmental markets as well. So again, we're making moves there that should hopefully allow us to grow in the gas market, but I don't expect us to be 57% of the market. At least I say this now. Somebody may say differently a decade from now, but for now, that's not my expectation.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, Paul, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Stella, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and meet with you. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion.
Thank you. And you can read more about why Nodal Exchange was selected as Energy Risk's Exchange of the Year award, and alongside all the write-ups, articles of our other winners on risk.net. Thank you again, Paul, and thank you very much for watching.